It's time to put your health in your own hands. Get ready to learn from today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. Now, here's your host.
This information is not intended to provide diagnosis, treatment, or medical advice. Products, services, information, and other content provided in this broadcast, including information that may be provided in this broadcast directly or by linking to a third-party website, is provided for informational purposes only. Please consult with a physician or other health care professional regarding any medical or health-related diagnosis or treatment options. Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Gary Gerber. Gary is a healing clinician who focuses on helping people find satisfying solutions so they can live a richer, fuller life. As a healing clinician, Gary's passion is to help people achieve higher levels of functioning and relational wellness. Through his career as a marriage and family therapist, his curiosity and tenacious spirit have motivated him to pursue new and ever-evolving forms of treatment that positively influence one's inner state of being. For more than 30 years, as a successful marriage and family therapist, Gary has conducted a successful private practice in marriage and family therapy. He has led seminars and workshops on conflict resolution throughout his career, addressing immediate challenges while getting at hidden issues that cause problems and conflict. Welcome, Gary.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So today, Gary, I wanted to focus more on addictions. We have talked previously about all types of topics, but the topic of addictions is, I think, something that it is part of the fabric of many people's daily lives in one form or another. So I'll let you take the lead since we have so many addictions that we could talk about. So tell me, first of all, what would addiction, how would that be defined for the average layperson?
Well, the one definition that I like very well is the one that Dr. Gerber gives. Now, he's a doctor in Vancouver, BC, who treats people who have all kinds of addictions in East Side Vancouver. He says that it's any behavior that gives temporary pleasure or temporary relief, but in the long run causes you harm, and you can't give it up despite its consequences. So it's a behavior that we use that gets entrenched, and we crave that behavior to feed the reward centers of the brain in a way that we can't give it up. We can't relinquish it when we want to. And it usually has destructive consequences for the person using it.
So destructive consequences for the person using it, not to mention the other people in that person's lives, the family members.
Absolutely. It affects everybody. Dr. Patrick Carnes, who is one of the leading authorities in the treatment of sex addiction, which is one of the things that I do a lot of, says that addiction is the number one health problem in our society, that its tentacles are so far-reaching. It affects families, it affects children, it affects marriages, it affects the workforce, it affects illness, and people who take time off from work for sick days. It puts a high level of pressure on the medical care system. It's a very, very costly disease. And I say addiction is a disease because many people look down on it and think that people should just pull up their bootstraps and stop drinking or stop using the behavior that is crippling their lives. But they can't do that. The point is, it's like the brain is on a runaway train. It's like the brain is hijacked and it cannot make the decision to stop using, even though the consequences on that person are very, very severe and on society. In fact, we say the end road of addiction is always the grave. because addiction kills a lot of people. And unchecked addiction will only get worse and worse and worse until it actually kills the person.
Wow, that's kind of a sad state of affairs. You mentioned that you do a lot of work related to sex addiction, and I imagine one of the things that makes that really tough is because of the fact that it's part of a human's life. And of course, when you talk about not only does it harm the person, but the relationships that person has. So let's go ahead and focus on that particular addiction today, because as a marriage and family therapist, you said that you actually talk or work a lot with people with this issue. So what is the primary biggest harm that sex addiction would do to someone's life?
Well, in a marriage, of course, it really affects the marriage in a very, very negative way. So it has a huge social component to it. It affects the children, it affects the marriage, the families frequently don't make it, although surprisingly enough, 70% of couples where there's a sex addiction survive, which is higher than the national average of the marriage itself. 50% of those fail, but 70% of marriages survive when there's an addiction. Now, that's partly because an addiction is a disease. And when the spouses and families and everyone understands that this is a brain disorder, then it can be treated. And many recovering addicts can live very, very happy, healthy lives. One of the reasons I got into this is because I noticed that in my marital work, the whole sexual piece often became a huge issue, and there was much more involved than just some of the normal sexual behavioral things that go on. And I noticed that a lot of people would talk about if they can't have sex, they become very pouty, very moody, and that's often an indicator that there's a sex addiction there, because frequently people who have had who have a sex addiction, after sex they will feel depressed. They will often withdraw. Sometimes people will go into a kind of a binge and purge cycle. That is that they'll binge by having a lot of sex, and then they'll feel very shameful, very bad, and have no sex for a period of time. And you get this kind of oscillating effect going on that really takes them down and is really very difficult for them.
So what would you say with the people, what helps the people with sex addiction in terms of the therapy? And you said that 70% of those relationships actually involved in that actually are saved, or they're able to do that. That's good news. So what is the primary way that you deal with that type of an addiction?
Yeah, this is an addiction. Sex addiction is a behavior addiction or a process addiction. It's not an addiction where you're taking a substance into your body, and then the treatment for a substance would be, you say, well, stop taking the substance into your body, and some people do that to become sober. With sex, it's a little different, just like a food addiction too, which is also a process addiction. You can't say to people, okay, you got to stop eating. You can't say to people, you got to stop having sex. So the task in treatment is to differentiate healthy sex from the addictive sex that's going on. So frequently, one of the things we do, first of all, we get people into 12-step programs. The research shows that people who have addictions do best in terms of their recovery if they're in therapy and they're also in a 12-step program. And the 12-step program is ingenious. My clients, I always make sure they get to 12-step programs, and it's ingenious and wonderfully helpful in the sense that addicts tend to isolate. All addicts tend to isolate because they feel a lot of shame. They withdraw into themselves. They're not happy about what they do. When you get them into these programs, they realize that there are other people there who can also help them. And these are people who understand them before they don't have to tell them their whole story. People understand because they've been there, and that is so healing. One of the things that we know is true of an addict is that there's usually a trauma somewhere in their childhood, in their past. And that's often sex abuse. It's sometimes physical abuse. Sometimes it's neglect. There are a whole bunch of ways in which children can be traumatized. And It's showing some love and care to these people again. What happens with the addictive brain is that if children are raised in a culture, in a society or a family where there's a lot of stress, the brain develops in such a way that the reward centers they don't develop in the ways they do in a normal person. So the reward centers, reward chemicals are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. Those are sort of the main ones. Children that are stressed out, the brain, when it develops, doesn't develop in a way that those reward centers actually reward the person in a way that they feel good. Those are the feel-good chemicals that I just mentioned. And so if people aren't rewarded from the inside, that their brains give them the chemicals that are needed to feel good, they'll look for it from outside. So addicts who don't feel good because of their the stress that they've sustained in their upbringing, they will go looking for it elsewhere. So it could take many forms. It can take the form of sex. It can take the form of imbibing drugs or alcohol. It can take overeating, sometimes gambling, overspending, sometimes just going back to your cell phone, retreating to the cell phone all the time. That too is becoming an addiction today, or gaming. Many things can happen that become addictions. But in sex addiction, as in any other addiction, caring and loving that person is the first order of business. If we can't do that, we shouldn't be treating them.
So just before I forget, another time I will invite you back and we'll talk about that addiction of the gaming and the cell phones, because I think that is probably one of the number one things I see, because people literally are using their phones as they drive down the road, even though it's illegal, or when they eat and causing accidents and things. So that's a whole nother subject that we'll have to.
It's a whole other subject, but it's just another way that people cover up their pain. Addiction is always about covering up pain.
So
whether it's, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking about the sex addiction, because what you were, you think about, the relationship of it's so hard now because so many people today, especially younger people, there used to be a process of getting to know somebody, and then you have this relationship that leads to sex, and now it just seems like it's sex, and then it may lead to nothing or to a relationship. But that in itself has to be extremely painful, that disconnect that people have. Do you find that the people with a sex addiction are disconnected from the actual relationship in itself, like
yes,
like in a marriage?
Absolutely. We always say that addiction is an attachment disorder. The bonding has been ruptured early on in life, and so that when people meet their partners, they don't bond either. One of the things that we marry for is to feel bonded to somebody, to feel connected in a very deep, intimate way. And why shouldn't we want to do that? If that's not possible, or if people don't know how to do that, then they'll look for all kinds of other ways to fill up the empty space that's created by that. And yes, a lot of people have got those attachment disorders in this particular society. And as I mentioned earlier, that comes from the childhood detachment from parents or detachment from significant others, where they weren't loved, where they weren't soothed. There was no one to go to when they needed soothing as a little child. I often do in my initial interviews, I always ask people when I do their family of origin information, I say to them, who did you go to for soothing when you were a little child? Who was there to soothe you? And they say, well, it wasn't dad, it was mother, or it wasn't mother, it was dad, or it was a grandparent, and that's God. Thank God for good grandparents. But these children often, these people will often say there was nobody to go to, and that's a sad state of affairs. Well, what do you do with that? You don't know really how to bond with anyone, even though you crave it at a very deep level. And so there's all kinds of things then that all kinds of ends people will go to try and fill that empty space in their lives.
So when somebody has this sex addiction and you talk to them, obviously you do this in-depth intake, I guess is what that would be called. But how long does it take? I mean, you said that there is definitely hope for this type of addiction, getting through it and improving. But how long is it like alcoholism where, obviously if you're an alcoholic, you're basically always an alcoholic? Or is it, I mean, how is it perceived?
Yes, we say that the addiction, the compulsion that results from that gets entrenched somewhere in life, that will remain, but it doesn't have the strength that it has over you when you get into recovery. And the idea of always an addict, yes, you'll always be a bit vulnerable to that particular compulsion. And there are certain things that certain people can't do. For example, an addict, an alcoholic may not be able to walk into a pub again because that might trigger them. Whereas sex addict may not be able to talk to a woman alone again because it might not trigger them. Or they may not be able to talk to someone in counseling because that's not a safe environment for them or for the person, obviously. So there are certain things they may not be able to do, but once they come to understand that, then they can say, okay, that I won't do, but this I can do. And they can live very healthy lives. They don't want to reactivate that addictive process, that kind of zoning out process that happens, and they talk about the addictive stupor they get into and how painful that is. Addicts don't want to get back into that. And it takes about between 3 to 5 years we say, for healing to come. And that is with intensive therapy and also to be in the 12-step programs. In fact, people generally stay in 12-step programs the rest of their lives because what they find is the fellowship is so powerful and so strong, and they've met so many wonderful human beings there that they continue to stick with it.
So for a sex addiction, what would the first step be in that particular 12-step program?
The first step is always admitting. Are you talking about the 12 steps themselves?
Yeah, you said that would be.
Yeah, the first step in the 12-step program is admitting that you're powerless over the addiction, and you turn it over to your higher power. That's the first step. And for addicts to really get into that and really acknowledge that they're powerless over it. One of the things is so important because one of the things that addicts believe is that they can manage it on their own very fallaciously because they can't. And they think they're the center of the universe and that they can make all the decisions that they're making and still continue to run their lives. And they find out when they hit rock bottom and things really close in on them that they can't do that. And that's often when they come into treatment.
So if somebody, obviously, you know how when people fall in love, that the initial excitement, people seem to be always having sex all the time and they just can't get enough of each other. How do people know the difference between sex addiction and just that early stage of that, oh, I think I'm madly in love with you, I can't get enough of you? How do you know the difference?
Well, one of the tests I always say to people, sex always belongs in a relationship where there's other intimacy, that is emotional intimacy of another kind. Now, you can rush in and have sex right away, which lots of couples do, and it doesn't mean they can't have relationships. But sex belongs in a kind of a seedbed of caring, of love, of forgiveness, of commitment, those kinds of things. And you often don't find that in relationships where it's just all about sex. One of the ways to determine is just about sex, or is it about other things? Does the person really care about you? Is the person concerned when you're hurting? Is the person there for you when you're down? Is the person doing wonderful things for you that make you feel good, like the whole affectionate part of the relationship? What's the friendship aspect of this relationship? Does it feel good to be with this person, or is it just about the sex? We talk about the sharing component of a relationship. Can you actually share your hopes, your dreams, your doubts, your fears, your tenderness, your sadness, your warmth, your anger in a way that things get processed to both people's satisfaction? That's very key in a relationship. And if it's just sex and it's some of these other wonderful components of any marriage relationship or any, primary relationship with a significant other, if they're not being met, then it's a big red light.
Wow. That's interesting. But that is really good information, because I think sometimes people are a little bit confused about, when is it an addiction and when is it just that initial excitement over being with somebody new, or that you think that you're in love with them. So you said that it can take like 2 to 5 years, which sounds like a long time. But obviously, I guess if you're somebody who wants to have good relationships with your loved ones, then that's actually a relatively short time if you look at it in the scheme of a lifetime. So this type of sex addiction with people, it's very different than the people who are, like, I guess, into pornography or into whatever, child molestation. I mean, those are obviously different forms. Is that pornography typically involved in it?
Yes, pornography is very much a part of sex addiction. Now, child molestation, not necessarily, although it could be. But
Okay.
Somebody who's a sex offender and a sex addict, those are two different individuals.
Okay.
Now, it could show up in the same individual, but we always differentiate between the two. I see a lot of people who are sex addicts, but they're certainly not sex offenders.
Right, because they're having sex with, like, say, their wife or their girlfriend or someone who's appropriate, or not.
Yeah, that's right. They're not violent. They're not abusing somebody. Like a sex offender will be abusing somebody. Now, it doesn't mean that or abusing a minor. I mean, they're abusing somebody who's less powerful than what they are. And abuse is always about power. It's not about sex. So even though sex is part of it. But the addicts, yes, as you mentioned, pornography, it's very much a part of it. In fact, pornography is one of the things that will really speed up a sex addiction. It's affordable, it's available, and it's anonymous. And those three things make it a real potent mix for people. And if people have any inclination to sex addiction already, that will really speed it up.
So in your experience, how do the people with sex addictions typically end up talking to you in your office? Is it a self-referral? Is it their loved one, their wife, their husband, their spouse, or some significant other? How do people normally come to the realization that they've got a problem that is serious enough that they seek help?
Well, they come, usually they're self-referred to me. Sometimes they're referred by other people, by clergy or doctors. Occasionally that happens. But people go to the website and look up my website and realize that I'm a certified sex addiction therapist, and then they will call and get treatment. Now, we always are interested in what brings them into treatment at that time. Why didn't they come 2 years earlier or 5 years earlier? Because this kind of an addiction has a long history, usually, with people. And usually, in some cases, they'll be busted. Their wife will find things on the phone, and they suddenly have to come face to face with what they're doing with the people that they're hurting. In some cases, they just realize that they've tried to stop and they can't, and they realize that they're into masturbation, compulsive masturbation or something like that, to the point of saying there's just something wrong here, I got to do something. So they'll go look up and self-refer that way. But people usually reach a point where they become very desperate. And then is the time when they come in for treatment.
Well, at least the good news is that there are people out there like you who are able to help, and that it is something that you can get help with, and that the outlook is good. If you're talking about that 70%, 7 out of 10 people are able to save their relationships and save their lives, from this particular addiction, pretty good odds, I would think. So
it's amazing odds and surprising odds to us, actually, because we thought it would be much lower than that.
Yeah, you would think, because of the fact that it's part of your fabric of your life. You know, it's not like drugs or alcohol where you can go, well, I'm not going to drink anymore, or I'm not going to do drugs anymore. You know, and especially if unless you're going to be celibate, but if you're in a relationship with somebody, you know, that's part of most relationships. So you would.
Yeah. One of the ways that we work with that, Tammy, is that we have our clients do a sex holiday. That is no sex with their spouse and no sex with themselves for 90 days. Now that's for some of them a big stretch, but what that does is it forces the addict to develop a new sexual relationship with his or herself. So they have to come to grips with, when they wanted to use sex to medicate, what else do they put in place with that? And then a whole new sexual side can emerge. And the sexual side that is healthy can start to emerge. Spouses will often talk about, I know when I'm having sex with an addict or when I'm having sex with my husband or wife, whatever the case may be, because the spouses really know that difference.
In terms of it's the same person, but the way that they're having that sexual event is different. Is that
Yeah, more caring. Oftentimes they'll find when people are in the throes of their addiction, they're often very irritable. They're fast. They're curt. They tend to kind of be outside themselves, you know, not really there. The spouses can pick that up right away.
More of the animal instinct part rather than the loving, compassionate, caring part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. We say that when the addict is like the runaway brain or the hijacked brain, it's really the reptilian brain that is running the show. And the frontal lobes are not engaged. And the frontal lobes are what gives us choice. They tell us this will be bad for us, it'll be bad for our families, it'll be bad for our kids. But when the reptilian brain is just taking over and the decision is not funneling through those frontal lobes, then you have the hijacked brain, and that's what people can't stop it.
Wow, this is actually very interesting. I mean, I can honestly say I've never really had this conversation with anyone before about this topic, but it is very interesting, and I think it's definitely one that people need to talk about and know that there's help. And I wanted to ask you, if somebody is out there and they would like to talk to you or contact you to get more information about getting help from you, what's the best way to do that, Gary?
Well, they can go to my website, that is gary-gerber.com, and there's information on there. My phone number is on there. They can call me at 403-270-8824. That's another way to get in touch with me.
Okay. So you can go to the website, and it's gary-gerber.com. And again, everyone, Gary is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he is a certified sex addiction therapist. So he definitely has a lot of experience in this area. And again, just in our conversation today, I don't know about you, but I personally learned a lot about this topic that I didn't know. And it really makes a lot of sense, because think about it. If you're in the throes of sex addiction, your relationships are being affected, your family, you may be on the verge of divorce because of it, or maybe you are divorced because of it. And now you have to deal with this issue because it's wrecking your life. So I think that's really important. So Gary, before I let you go, is there anything else that you'd like to add to our conversation?
Well, I would just like to say that there's hope for addicts of all kinds. There's certainly hope for sex addicts. I see people recovering all the time. I've had people in therapy for several years now, and I can see that their brains have actually shifted. We know that the neuroplasticity of the brain is a reality, and actually the brain circuitry can shift, and that's very, very good news. So if people stick with it, they can really do very well, and that's the word of hope that I'd like to leave you with.
Well, that is really great hope. So everyone, it's Gary-Gerber.com. You can reach out to Gary. And again, he is a marriage and family therapist and certified sex addiction therapist. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Gary.
You're very welcome. Great to be with you again.
Everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. To get more solid health and wellness information, visit optimalhealthradio.com.